What's good people, it's JayCactus back again with another tutorial, and this is another video by request because a lot of people have been asking me to do a tutorial on mastering using only stock plugins in FL. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to be using Maximus and a couple free plugins which I'll show you, so let's get straight into it. Alright, so I want to start off by being real and saying that I don't even master my beats. To me, you don't really need to. Because if you're going to get an artist on your beat, then it's going to get mastered after that. So I don't see the point in mastering your beat and then sending it to an artist, he records his vocals, and then it gets mastered again. It just doesn't make sense. So I just like to mix loud and have a soft clipper, like the Fruity soft clipper or the T-Rack soft clipper on the master channel, and that's about it. If you're just uploading your beats to YouTube and Beatstars, that's all you need. But if you were going to do like a beat tape, or you just wanted your instrumentals just sounding as good as possible, then you could master them if you don't really intend on getting an artist on them. So I'm going to show you a couple techniques. So if you want to master your beats properly, I'd recommend mixing them to about -6 dB and then exporting the stereo file like I've done here. So I'm going to play you this file. This is at -6 dB, so you might want to turn your headphones up.
JayCactus.
Right, so another drill track. So what you want to do first is find the loudest part in your beat, so usually the hook. You can just look at the waveform and see where the loudest point is. So it's going to be somewhere around here. I know that the hook's around here anyway, so I can just highlight this section around here. You can see it's hitting at around -6 dB. So when you're listening to the track, you want to listen out firstly for anything that's wrong with the track. So listen out for any clicks or pops, if there's too much distortion, like whatever it is. If there's something that's wrong in the track now, you need to go back to the mix and fix everything first. But if everything's sounding clean in the mix, then you can start mastering. So what you want to do is, I'd personally recommend bringing in a reference track. So find a beat on YouTube that you like, or just something in the charts, like whatever you like, whatever beat that you like the mix of. Bring that into the session. Make sure it's a similar vibe to your track as well. It's pointless using like a pop reference track if you're mixing a drill beat. So bring a drill beat into the session and analyze that. And you can use tools like, for example, Span. Span's a free tool. So let's say this is the reference track. You can kind of see that all the energy is in the low end, as most drill beats are. It ducks out in the low mids a bit, comes back up in the high mids and the highs. And just remember that vocals normally sit in the higher mids, so if your beat is a bit low in the high mids, don't worry too much about it if you wanted to get a rapper on it, because they're going to fill that space. So you can also compare it with a parametric EQ. You can have a look at the reference track. Again, you can see that most of the energy is in the low end, but I think Span is a bit more accurate. So once you've compared the track and you know what you want to increase or decrease, you can use the EQ. And I'll use a parametric EQ just because it's a stock plugin. So in an EQ, when you're mastering, most people tend to take out everything below 20 Hz and everything after 18K. And that's because everything below 20 Hz basically gets conveyed to your inner ear, and it makes it just sound a bit rumbly. You can't really hear it. Let me just show you with a fab filter, because you can use this as a brick wall in there. So if I cut out everything up to 20 Hz, let me know if you can hear that, because I can't hear shit. So you don't really need it. And you can see that there's definitely energy there. Slowly bring it back up. But that's a paid plugin, so we're going to use the parametric EQ. So I can use this frequency knob just to dial it back to about 20 Hz. And you can see in the top left as well, up here it says the frequency, just so it's a bit more accurate. So 20 Hz, and you could just roll that off a little bit. And then same with 18K. Let me just give you another example here. So 18K. Again, I can't hear shit there. So parametric EQ, just going to use this band, go to 18K, and again just roll that off a little bit. If you wanted to make it steeper, you can use this one and just drag it down, just so it's not affecting the frequencies just below it and a bit above there. And let's say you wanted to add more bass. This track doesn't need it, but if you wanted to, I would only make subtle boosts. So for example, 0.2, I wouldn't even boost more than 1 dB, and I'd just tighten it up a little bit. You want it quite wide if you're boosting. You don't want to be making like narrow cuts in the master. If you need to do that stuff, then go back to the mix and sort it there. But I don't think I need to raise the bass. I'm boosting mine, literally just a subtle amount. But if you're finding that your track was kind of muddy, you could cut it at around like 350, 300. It tends to be where all the muddiness is. I'm just going to boost it a little bit though. The high end I'm fine with, but some people will raise it a bit at the high end. I can boost it around 0.8. And then what I'm going to go into is Maximus, because it's another stop plugin. So Maximus, you've got a lot of control in Maximus. So I'll talk you through some of the features that it's got. So when you're looking at Maximus, if you're new to it, it might look a bit confusing, but basically you just focus in here first. So this is how you're going to separate the frequency bands. So you're going to have a look at the low side of the track, or if you click solo, you can take a listen. So if you're on low, obviously you're just listening to the low end of the track, like the bass and the kick. The mid, you'll find like the snare, instruments as well, and then the highs, obviously your hi-hat, crashes, cymbals, and then the master is everything. So you can treat each band separately, and you can adjust a band as well. So if you come, I'm already in bands. If it looks like this, just go to bands. And this is how you can determine what's going to be the lows, the mids, and the highs, or how much of them you want. So for example, if I just go on lows and solo it, if I bring this up, I'm starting to get some high mids. So if I want to treat just the lows, then I usually just tend to just grab the bass and the kick. I don't really want to mess with the instrument too much. Around about there. And then mids. If you want to adjust the mids, obviously you can just increase the lows or bring the highs back. And then you can see that the band's getting shorter. I think that's fine. So now I've got my bands separate. You can start treating each one. So when you're looking at this graph here, this grid, if you know what a compressor is, this point here, if you bring it down, that's basically the threshold. I'm going to go back to monitor as well, just so you can see exactly what's happening. So if I bring this point down, threshold is how much of the signal you want to capture. So you can see here, if I play it, if it's up here, I'm not capturing anything, but if I bring it down the line, about there, you can see I'm starting to capture the kick. So again, when you're compressing on the master channel, you don't want to do too much compression, maybe just a couple dB max. So I'm just compressing the kick a little bit, and then the pre-gain, this is going to push the volume into Maximus, and then the post-gain is going to be the volume after. So the pre-gain is pushing it into the compressor, post-gain is after. So if you're compressing a lot and you're reducing the signal by like 2 dB, then you might want to increase the post-gain by like 2 dB as well. But in mine, I don't actually want to change the compression in the low end. I was happy with it in the first place, so I'm just going to reset these. But I do want to merge the low signal. So if you look at this tool here, this is how you can merge it into mono or make it stereo and wider. Usually in tracks, if you want it sounding a bit cleaner, then you'd merge the low end. So bass frequencies usually need to be down the middle of a signal. They don't always have to be, but let me just show you. So if I pull it left, you're going to hear that getting wider in your headphones. If I pull it all the way to the right, then it's merged. That's in mono. So I'm happy with that now. And then I can move to the mids. Again, you could bring the threshold down a little bit. This second point is the ratio, so how much compression you want to happen. So if you bring it all the way down, there's going to be more compression. You can see it's cutting out more, or it's dipping more. If you bring it all the way up, nothing's happening. And then this curve here, if you bring this up, this acts as a knee in compression, which is basically how harsh you want the compression to be. So I'm just going to compress it a little bit, and maybe boost that a tiny bit. And then in the mids, I actually want to make them a little bit wider. So I'm going to bring this dial to the left until I'm happy with it. Around 50 is fine. And then in the highs, just compressing them a tiny bit. I also want to separate the highs as well, just to spread things out a little bit. Round about there. So one other thing that I want to show you in the compression, if you are going to compress your kick, or like the low end, then I'd recommend bringing the attack up a little bit, because if the attack is all the way down, it's basically going to affect the transients of the kick, so it's going to get rid of that punch of the kick. So if you increase it a little bit, it will let them transients through, so you're still going to get the smack from the kick, but it's also going to be compressed. And then the release time is how fast you want the signal to go back to the normal state after it's been compressed. So now in the master, you can basically make it as loud as you want it to be, or as loud as it needs to be. If you push it too much, it's just going to distort too much, so try not to compress it too much. So in the post, I'm just going to bring it back to like minus 0.1 or 2, we'll be fine there. And then I'm going to bring the pre-gain up until it's compressing a little bit. So you can see it dipping just a little bit, and that's all you really need. And then you can take a look at saturation as well. So I tend to just play with it on the master channel. So if I bring the threshold up a little bit, you can see that it's now activated, and you can set the ceiling. So if it's just at the top here, it's only really going to affect the kick, maybe the 808. So if you're saturating the kick a little bit, like you are here, this is basically what a soft clipper is. So if you didn't have this on, it would just sound more of like a limiter. But if you've got the saturation on, it's going to sound a little bit more like a soft clipper. And obviously if I show you the extreme, that's saturating everything, which you obviously don't need, so. You can play around with it until you find a sound that you like, but for me, I just like making subtle changes in the master channel. And then the last plugin that I want to show you is Loudest Media. So this is going to give you basically an overall perceived loudness reading measured in LUFS. So if I play it, So if you're looking at the short term and integrated, they're the main ones. So short term is like the immediate signal, and then integrated is like an average over time. So that's the main one. So for places like Spotify, Apple Music and YouTube, I'm just going to show you Spotify's site now. So this is on their FAQ section, and it says target the loudness level of your master at -14 dB integrated LUFS and keep it below -1 dB. So all of these platforms are basically normalizing their tracks to be around -14 LUFS, right? So if you're pushing yours too hard, it's just going to get like brought back down, or it's just going to be overly saturated, because you know that's how they're working it. They just wanted consistency throughout the volumes of tracks, so you don't need to push your tracks too hard if you're uploading it to be streamed, right? So even -12 is probably a little bit too much, but I'm fine with that. There's not too much saturation when I've tried it before and uploaded my own stuff, so you know I'm fine with it hitting there. And then they were asking for it at around -1 dB. So in Maximus, if you wanted it to be set at -1 dB, you could just bring this post down, and you can see at the top here it starts to change if we move it again, -1 dB. I'll be real, I don't always do that. I tend to push my tracks kind of loud. I don't know why, I just can't help it. And when I've tested it on platforms, they haven't saturated it that much. So play around with your own tracks, see how it sounds with yours, but if you wanted to stick to the rules, then follow that. -14 dB for LUFS and -1 dB for like the dB reading. It doesn't mean you have to stick to that though, because it's different for different platforms, but the majority of them are focusing around -14 LUFS. So just don't push it too hard, that's all. So I hope you enjoyed the video. As I said, I never really master my beats. To me, a beat is an unfinished song because I always want a rapper or a singer on it. So it just seems pointless mastering it and then having it mastered again once vocals are on it. But if you do want to master your beats, and hopefully you took some advice from that, hopefully you learned a couple of the techniques, and I'll see you next time.